In this lesson, I'm going to show you the toolbox and the different categories within it. So let's create new Flash file, ActionScript 3.0. And we've gone over our command lines, our panels, our property inspector window down here. Now here's our toolbox. And this is going to look very familiar, a lot of these tools, if you've worked with other Adobe products such as Elements or Photoshop. So first of all, this is not, you're not seeing all of the tools, right, because our screen's too small. So there is another view. These two arrows, not unlike we saw these two arrows over here, give us a different view of our toolbox. So if we click this, instead of making it super long, it makes it wide. So also, as with other tools, we can move our toolbox around. If we're not comfortable with it being over there, we can move it over here, and we can move it wherever we want. But I think its default is fine. And remember, no matter what you do to mess up your workspace and you want to get it back how it was, you can always go, as we went before, workspace, default. Brings it back how it was. So I'm going to make it wide and leave it there. Now, you notice these lines separate different sections of the toolbox? Alright, here's why. This top section is selection tools, and you've probably seen some of these. We have the selection tool, the sub-selection tool, which is interesting. We'll learn about that later. Free transform tool. Remember, that allows you to take an object and basically skew it, change the shape of it, basically transform it freely, as it sounds. And the lasso tool, you've probably used that in Photoshop before, and that allows you to make a selection of a certain section of your object, and we'll also see some of that later. Now you notice this little tiny caret. You've seen this before in Photoshop also, or other Adobe products. That little caret means there are other tools of a similar nature as the one on top hidden below that top tool. So to get to those, you click the caret with a left click and hold. So when you left click and hold on the caret, or it can actually be anywhere on the button, then we see the tools that are hidden below it. So we have the free transform tool and the gradient transform tool here. We're not going to get into that right now. But this section, remember, is selection tools. This is not for creating graphics, but merely selecting portions of graphic or objects that are on the screen. All right, our next section here is drawing and type tools. And this is where you have text, the pen tool. If we left click and hold, we see a few different similar tools under the pen tool. And we have the line tool, the rectangle tool, and if we left click over that, we see other options we've no doubt seen before where we can create different shaped objects. The oval tool, the polystar tool, and we may get into some of those later. The pencil tool and the brush tool, which is what it sounds like. Alright, our next section here is painting and retouching. Oh, I'm sorry, it only goes to here. And this is the ink bottle tool, and then the paint bucket tool, and you've seen that on other programs where it fills in a little picture of a paintbrush there. Eyedropper tool, if there's a specific color that you want to match, that's what that's used for. The eraser tool is just what it sounds like. Alright, now what about this next section here? These two. Well, these are navigation tools. So the hand tool, remember, we can move around a document by just left clicking and pulling around to the section we want. We've seen the hand tool used on other Adobe products, for instance, like Adobe Acrobat Reader, where you can take the hand and move the object around to the section of the workspace that you want to look at. Another place to zoom with, or another tool to zoom with, remember, there's countless places to do the same thing, like we mentioned. We have zooming over here that we worked with. We can zoom from our command lines up here, or with this. Now, with the zoom tool, it's a plus sign. So wherever you click on on the screen, that's the section that's zoomed in on. And we'll probably use this later when we have some actual objects on our canvas. And then, of course, to zoom back out, we could just see it tells you the exact zoom percentage you're at. We could zoom back out by just going back to 100% or whatever. Or by holding Alt down, you notice the magnifying glass turns to a minus sign. That means we could zoom out via that route as well. Alright, so these are navigation tools. Now, this next area is called the options area. And you notice right now we have stroke color, fill color, no color, swap colors, black and white, and then enlarge and reduce. And by the way, these two, actually let me explain this first. This option area here, depending on which tool you've selected in these other areas, it then gives you different options for that tool, which is why we're clicked on the zoom tool. It gives us these two options, enlarge and reduce. So instead of us using the Alt key, remember, to zoom in and out or to change it from magnifying to reduce, we could also do it here. We could reduce, we can enlarge. So these are different options that pertain to the tool itself that you've selected. So notice how it changes. See, that zoom tool disappeared once I chose hand tool. Eraser tool, you notice how the options changed. Now, do you notice something else that's changing besides this options area, depending on the tool we've selected? Down here, the properties section changes. So it even gives us more options. For instance, if we click on the text tool, now instead of going up to text, font, remember 1,000 different ways to do the same thing. Now once we have the text tool selected, now we have many other options down here that pertain to that tool. So both this area as well as the properties area pertain to the tool you've selected. So as you change tools, you can take note of the different properties you can change while using that tool. See, brush, what color do you want the brush tool to be? A lot of different options like that. Alright, so that's a brief overview of the toolbox, as well as how it pertains to the properties panel down here.